Hello, everybody, and make sure to walk with rhythm. Welcome back to the Legends of Dune trilogy of books that I've been reading, with the final book in this particular trilogy being the Battle of Corrin. So, the gist of this book is it's the conclusion. It ends the battle, this 1,000-year reign, of the machines. The first book, there's kind of a cold war going on where the robots have been in charge for years upon years upon years, but in the shadows, in the background, since the machines did not kill the humans, they were, you know kind of like a large scale, Star Wars rebellion, you know planning, but before they, actively did military things, they were planning how best to deal with the oppression. But the catalyst to really make them go all out, full force on the machines was the ending to book one with what happened, with Serena Butler and everything. Without getting into spoilers, though, of course, if you've you know read the past two, you know what that is. But I'm just saying this just in case. Um, and the second book goes over quite a span of time. You go like 70 years or something like that. Um, and we get more family people added. We had Xavier Conan, and then we get to learn about Abelard Butler and everything, and all these new people, and we're developing things where we're seeing little hints of where things will go for the broader Doom universe. But this is still 10,000 years away from uh, the events of the first Doom book. So a lot of things are being set up here as like the genesis of such things, but you're not getting like the full complete. So this is how the entire society, and civilization is like in the first Dune novel. No, because we're still a long ways off from that, but you're getting a lot of the genesis of certain things. And then, of course, we develop more things with those characters, and then we move on to book three, um, where again we're continuing this, campaign against the machines, and we even get to the part on the like 500 page mark or something like that. I kind of forget, where the humans are pretty successful. They have successfully destroyed most of the machines. The only thing left is Corrin. The final place, the final assault, Corrin. But no human can penetrate the Corrin because the machine defense is so tight. But that's like the last bastion of the machines, right? And since that's the only planet left and it's a big galaxy, humans go about their lives, they move on. But the threat is still there. It's not like the machines are gone. And so that's what the last latter part of the book deals with. Then we finally see the ending to all machines of all time. Well, maybe not all machines, but we do see basically the end of the machines. The no more threat of machines will ever again be a threat, because the fervor of the religion, will make it so that way robots never return. Unless, of course, we're talking about the Kevin J. Anderson and Brian Herbert sequels to Herbert's work. But we're not there yet. We won't be there for a very long time, and we'll see how I feel about that once we get to that. That being said, without getting into spoilers, there's a lot of characters, a lot of things going on with these characters. Ishmael Neeb over, on Arrakis, and then that's a whole, like, basically separate thing. I will say, I think it's completely fair criticism to say that, kind of like the Jedi Academy trilogy, and I think this is very much a Kevin J. Anderson thing, even though he was also writing with Brian Herbert. There's a lot of characters, a lot of things going on, a lot of different stories. I mean, and it's all to help develop the world of Dune. None of it, I feel, is, not important. Unlike, I like the Jedi Academy trilogy, and I even like the stuff with Jaina and Jason, right? For those of you who know the Star Wars books that Kevin J. Anderson has wrote. But it feels pretty pointless. Like, it's not necessary. Now, I find it fun, so I don't really care that it's in there. But other people will be like, it's so necessary, it's so stupid. Why is it in there? Blah, 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 and complain about that. That's whatever, that's fine. But I don't think it's the same criticism here, because I feel like everything is important, but there are parts that don't feel as important to the immediate story, that feel more like setup for other things. And I mean, it all kind of interconnects, so it's all sort of relevant and important within this current storyline. But there are particular stories that feel more set up to be like, oh, this is what's going to happen in Reginald Dune. Um, like I said, with Ishmael Neeb is relatively self-contained. I mean, it does have connecting threads with the larger story going on within these novels, but it is a mostly self-contained thing on Arrakis. Setting up the Freeman dynamic, where you have the Freeman, out in the desert, and then you have the same race of people, I guess, that live within the city area. Like in the first Dune book or movie, if you've seen the movie from a few years back, you have those people that are like watering the trees and stuff or whatever, in the city area. Um, that was kind of a split that happens in this book, so there's that. Um, you also have stuff with Norma Senva, which is very important because she's essentially the origin story for the hyperspace sort of system, space folding thing that we have in the original Dune novel, because it gets developed here. We even get a navigator, our first, like genetically altered navigator person within the end of this trilogy. So that's set up to show that, as time progresses, there's going to be more space navigators, and we're going to get the Navigators Guild as we know it in the original Dune book. And it's the same thing with the Bene Gesserit. We don't even have the Bene Gesserit yet. We just have a sisterhood, which is established by the end of this book, which is, it's still not the Bene Gesserit society as we exactly know it to be, because it hasn't developed into that yet. But the basic tenets and ideas of what that is are established here. And I believe we'll get more into that when we get into the book Sisterhood of Dune, which I imagine by the end of that trilogy, if not by the end of that book, the Bene Gesserit will become a thing. And I don't know how much later those books take place. But then we also, we have this wonderful relationship with many characters, but Vorian Atreides and Abelard Harkonnen. Vorian Atreides was really good friends with Xavier Harkonnen, and he was really good friends with one of his sons, Abelard Harkonnen. By the end of this book, you also get a genesis for why both families kind of hate each other, why Atreides and Harkonnens just don't get along. So that's interesting as well. There's a lot of stories going on, and then of course, there's Erasmus, who by far is the most interesting part, I think, and the best addition to the Dune universe that Kevin J. Anderson and Brian Herbert have given us. I really enjoy Erasmus as a character. The weakest part of this book has to be ominous. He's supposed to be the big ultimate bad, the ultimate AI that wants to destroy humanity, and he's just really bland and boring. But that's kind of the point of him. I don't think he really was meant to be this threatening thing. I mean, like, the machines themselves are threatening, but ominous isn't really. He's not even interesting, really. Erasmus is the interesting one. And Erasmus is by no means a good person. Erasmus is very much like Game of Thrones characters, verily morally gray, because on the one hand, and this is why I say he's like an evil Data from Star Trek, because he very much has done horrible things. He's experimented and killed and mutilated lots and lots of people throughout his life, and he doesn't feel bad about it, even by the end of this book. But you can see throughout this trilogy, his whole thing is he doesn't want to become human, but he wants to understand humans because he knows that humans have advantages that machines don't. He wants to merge machine and man to make the perfect synergy between the two, which is why even in the last book, a Mentat, the first Mentat, was created. Somebody he considers a son, somebody that he genuinely feels emotions for, which he probably hasn't always experienced. He could give a damn to the rest of them, but he does care about this one particular human individual. I'd even argue loves this individual, which is really fascinating to read about. And then there's another part that I think is kind of weaker. It does make the I think people just don't actually read these books and just complain about them. It is a band-aid, but it does work. Because we start this trilogy, at a time where the machines have taken over. Now, Frank Herbert basically heavily implied that the machine crusade, the war, the jihad against the machines weren't really the bad guys. It was man in charge of machine that was bad. Man was ultimately the bad one. Now, as far as we are being told, when this first started, AI was just AI. However, humans first had a great empire because, humans like to conquer stuff. And then um, some humans decided to take their brains, flesh, actual, meat, and put it into robots. So these weren't the robots that are the main antagonists of the trilogy. They're a subsect, but they're the Titans. They are human beings because the brain's still there, put into robot bodies. Those are the Cymex. Those are the Titans. And they were in control of robots for a while until Omnis got so smart, got so intelligent, that he eventually overthrew the Titans, and then the Titans became subservient to Omnis. So humans in metal form had to conform and obey Omnis. But we skipped all that. We missed all that. We only started this trilogy with the Butlerian Jihad, with Omnis in control, and the Titans basically his muscle. And we missed all of that. But yeah, so I think it's a neat band-aid on it. Obviously, it's not exactly Frank's vision. No one's arguing that it is exactly Frank's vision. That being said, I don't think it hurts his universe. I don't think it hurts his franchise. I quite enjoy this trilogy. And I think if you weren't this, like, diehard, like, nobody could touch this universe except for Frank Herbert, I think you'll find enjoyment out of it. Don't go into it expecting this, like, deep political drama, um, and thing that Frank Herbert was all about. Brian Herbert obviously cares about his father's work. It'd be hard pressed for you to argue he doesn't, but there is a different style, a different, writing prose and everything, because it's Kevin J. Anderson and Brian Herbert writing together. Don't think that this is just Kevin J. Anderson. It is not. Brian Herbert is also writing chapters in this, and you can kind of tell when they're different authors too. Um, but overall, is it the greatest thing I've ever read? No, I do think it is well worth your time though if you enjoy the Dune universe and are willing to accept somebody else writing within it. It's far enough away to where they can kind of do their own thing with it, and it's a great sort of addition, I think, to the universe. That's pretty much my thoughts. I'm going to get into some spoilers. Some of the things I've already talked about, but if you don't want that, time to get out of here. But yeah, 3, 2, 1, now's your time to leave. At the beginning of this book, not really exactly the beginning, but Xavier's reputation is basically ruined, because at the end of the last book, Serena Butler knew that the only way, because they've been stuck in a war with the machines for like 70 years and they still had not succeeded. And humans have short attention spans, like, I can't even imagine fighting a war for like 70 years being almost 90. Like, that's just my life. My life has been a war against the machines. Like, I've never known anything else. So, and for a lot of people that are younger, they're like, well, I was born into this. Maybe it'd be easier just to give up, just to, let them win. Why do we gotta keep watching everybody die? Because they never knew of a time before the machines, like some of the other people had. So, they want to give up. So they need another fervor, because there was the fervor in the first book, which was Serena Butler's child. We needed another thing, but this one was purposely orchestrated instead of, a horrible circumstance. So this time, Serena Butler purposely has herself killed so she could be a martyr that would fuel the flames to finally end this war. But Xavier Harkonnen knows that Ilbis Jinjo convinced Serena that that was the best course of action, and so he kills him. And that makes him be, just scorned upon by all of history, by all of society. But And then Erasmus seems to generally love Gilbertus, who he basically raised, just to show Omnis that he could. But then he generally grows emotions for him, and Gilbertus seems to be the first mentat because that's what Erasmus refers to him as. And then, kind of around the 200, 300 page mark, this is when the humans are doing pretty good, so it's time for new plans. So they send a plague because what can't affect machines but can affect biological people? A plague. So there's a big epidemic that goes on and affects people. Vorian, time has passed. So Vorian still looks about 20, but everybody else is aged around him. He has grandchildren now that he didn't, exactly know about because he kind of got around for a bit. And that's a whole arc with him. His grandchild finds out that spice can give resistance to the plague, which is why people become more dependent upon spice here. And eventually the plague, all that gets figured out over a span of time, like a lot of time. And then we have a 19-year jump, which is crazy because humans are mostly successful. They mostly wipe out all of the machines, like I said, except for on Corrin. Corrin's the only place left where the machines thrive. But people get complacent. Like, well, it's only one place. So we can just keep guarding it forever and go about our lives. But Vorian's like, no, as long as they're around, we're still in danger. But during this, 19-year gap, the Titans plan to finally, like, this is our moment. We can finally rise up again. We just will make sure to keep the robots not, as smart as us. We can rule again as we rightfully should. And there's a really tough section to read about where Quentin Butler is stolen by the Titans, and Agamon, who is Vorian's father, he gets tortured and everything, and it's a whole lot. But there's also three. I'm sorry, I'm scrambling. There's like three omnises right now, and they're arguing, and it gets to the point where they literally blow up one of the AI, so there's only two of them left, which I thought was really funny. Later on, Vorian comes up this elaborate plot to convince his father that he had made a terrible error in judgment by joining the humans, that nobody appreciates what he's done, nobody recognizes his strength or the reality of the situation with the machines, and he goes to his father being basically like, I'll become a Cymek. I will be what you wanted me to be. We can take out the machine Ominous, and hopefully together we can, forge some kind of mutual symmetry between humans and Cymeks. But in the end, basically the remaining Titans, which are only like 3 or 4 of them left, all get murdered, and the Titans are no more. So all that's left is Corrin. And so we get the big final battle with Corrin, issue being Vorian's not having it. He wants it over. And there's a lot of slaves and stuff still on Corrin. There's going to be a lot of casualties. And Abelard Harkonnen doesn't think it's worth the risk. Vorian says, it is. Get out of my way. I command you. We're doing this. You've been with me through thick and thin. Trust me now. We gotta do this. We gotta make sure we end the threat forever. Abelard says no. Vorian Atreides sees this as the ultimate betrayal. And so he gets beat. So Abelard gets beaten and taken, into custody. They are successful. They destroy the machines, at least as far as we understand. We never really got an on-screen absolute certainty death of Erasmus, so we'll see if he's absolutely dead or not. He kind of just leaves his story, unless I missed something entirely. And Corrin is free of the machines. Meanwhile, on Arrakis, Ishmael abandons his stepson, saying, "You were never my son." And this is where the divide comes in between the Freeman people. Well, the Sensuni. Then Vorian basically tells Abelard that you're dead to me, and establishes the feud that, the Dune universe is known from. Harkonnens hate Atreides. It started here. Um, Atreides basically would, tell his kids how much Harkonnens suck forever. And he was originally going to clear Xavier's name, but after everything that happened to Abelard, he, out of spite, didn't. Because Xavier was a good man. But now everyone's going to remember Xavier and Abelard as bad Harkonnen, to just make the stereotype that every Harkonnen is bad. And of course, I don't think Abelard was as malicious. He was upset about it, disappointed. Didn't I don't think he really hated Vorian though. But he got old, and his kids came up with these fanatical stories. His dad, Vorian eventually, not Vorian, Abelard eventually died of an illness, and with no proof, his sons said conspiracy, it was Atreides. They did it. It's his fault. It's always the Atreides. Atreides are bringing us down. We are the rightful princes, we're the rightful people that should be, looked highly upon, and we are all scorned for something that we were born into, for something we never did. And our father tells us that he didn't, that he was doing a righteous act. So there's this inherent resentment that the Harkonnen children kind of aggrandize, like making their grandfather seem more important than he was, and their father, and then, vilifying the other side, vilifying the Atreides. So this huge rivalry, this huge hatred that both families have by the original, Dune book. Of course, there's also just the development of those characters themselves that would make them hate each other, as I'm sure we'll see in the prequel series that takes place like about 20 years before the events of the first book. So I'm sure there's that own hatred there, that own kind of scorn there, but already embedded within, these two peoples, there's a hatred there based on history, which is really sad because they used to be really good friends. But that is pretty much it. Next time I come to Dune, we'll be reading a trilogy that I think, as far as my understanding goes from the synopsis, is an origin story. I mean, we got the genesis of most of the factions here in this book, like Fake Your, how the fudge you say the name, Butler, changes his name at the end of this book because of the Battle of Corrin, because of how significant it is, because he doesn't want humanity to forget about how important this victory was, that the machines were finally eradicated from humankind, from the universe forever, just mankind. He changed his name to Corrino to remember the Battle of Corrin. So, that's the empire, that we have in the original Dune book. We have House Corrino, we have House Atreides, House Harkonnen. So all that's established. We have the beginnings of the Navigators Guild with Norma Senva becoming one of those things. We have Rakula starting the Sisterhood, so... and then we have, so far, all we have is one person, only a single individual, who is a Mentat, Gilbertus, who is, Erasmus's child. So there's a lot of things still, like, we don't know how all of those factions actually get started, because the series only establishes the genesis of most of that, without paving the way for explaining how all that became a part of society in a large, common form. So I expect the next trilogy will kind of get into that, establishing all of that, and explaining to us how those factions evolved and formed into what we see in the original Dune book. But yeah, overall, I think this trilogy is really good. It is a lot more simple than I think the Dune books are. There's a lot more philosophical, a lot more, I don't know what the word is, a lot more talkative. There's a lot more action in these books, simpler, it's war, Um, Most of the philosophical aspects you get from this book comes from Erasmus, or this trilogy comes from Erasmus, as he's contemplating humans versus machines and all that. So if you want that more like Frank Herbert, like sort of like philosophical discussions and whatnot, that mostly comes from Erasmus. But I think all the characters are fun. um I think the story is epic for what it's trying to tell, and I just think it's a good addition to the Dune universe. Do I think it's better written than Frank Herbert's work? In some ways. It's a quicker pace. In other ways, it's weaker. I'm admit that. I don't think Kevin J. Anderson is this god tier writer. I think he's a good writer. Um, but I don't need everything to be this creme de la crop, expert perfection of work. I just need to enjoy my time and escape reality for a little bit. And I think that this trilogy does that successfully. So, do I recommend it? Absolutely. So, until next time, guys, make sure to walk with rhythm. And I'll see you again in the next Dune series, whenever that comes. Till then.